Okay, come on. Dr. Helga Gemara. Hanurabban. Mevate is a Shvua. And Rashi tells us, Mevate Shvua. Omer Mevate Kikar Zualai. If someone says the words Mevate Kikar Zualai, Omer Shavua Shaloyech Lenu. It's just as if he said Shvua Shaloyech Lenu. And therefore, Bim Achloi if he does eat it, he's chayiv a carbon oil of Iser is a shvua. Iser, which doesn't make sense at first glance until the Gemara will explain it. Iser, imata omer iser shvua chayiv bimla potter. So, frag the Gemara, im ata omer iser shvua. It doesn't make sense because we just said that if you use the word iser, it's an iser. So pashas means if you said kikar zeh asur alai, it would mean an iser. So if it would mean an iser, that means it is a shvua. And then a moment later, the Brisa says, Im ata omer iser shvua via amrit iser shvua. We already said iser is an iser, right? Mavat is a shvua and iser is a shvua. So how could you then start speculating if Isser is a Shvua, it's Chayiv, if not, it's Potter, if you just said a moment ago that Isser is a Shvua, Isser does have the status of a Shvua. Amar Abaye, Halchika Amar, the Brisa requires some explanation, and this is the explanation. Mevate is Shvua. And once again, if someone said Mevate Kikar Zu Alai, that is creating a Shvua, prohibiting him from eating this Kikar. Isser is Mitvis B'Shvua. Isser means mitzvahs b'shul. What does mitzvahs b'shul mean? So Rashi explains. Isser alai kikar zu. If someone said those words, he points to this kikar, and he says, Isser alai kikar zu. This kikar is Isser alai. Harehu kami, thank you so much. It has the status, Harehu kami, shenishba ala kikar. It's as if he swore on kikar number 1. Then he took kikar number 2, the Chazav Amar al Kikar Achar Harei Kazeh. I want Kikar number 2 to be just like Kikar number 1. Kikar number 1 is also to him because he swore that he will not eat it, and then he says, I want Kikar number 2 to be just like Kikar number 1. Kazeh Kehitvis is Hasheni B'Rishon. So it's a new type of configuration. It's a way of making a Shvua or a neder without actually making the Shvua or neder, but just grabbing on to the shvua that was placed on another item. So Isser is not a shvua directly, it's a mitzvah b'shvua. It's a lashon of being mitzvah b'shvua. And therefore, Isser, does it work? What is the impact? So Isser means, if you said kikar or Isser alai, it's just like you were mitzvah, you compared it to another kikar. Now, what is the halacha? What is the verdict in such a case? So Zok to Gemara, under Abaye's explanation, Im ata omer mitvis b'shvua kemoisi shvua mipivdami. If you hold that type of shvua works, when I said I want kikar number 2 to be just like kikar number 1, if that works and it actually nets a real shvua, then chayiv. Then if you use the lashon iser, it will be chayiv as well, because iser has the same status as mitzvahs b'shvua. The malav, but if not, potter, it will be potter. So that is how Abaye learned this brisa. Zok Rashi, Iser mitzvahs b'shvua, which we just saw, Iser al kikar zu, Hareu k'misha nishba al kikar v'chazer v'amar al kikar achar Harei kazeh, kehitvis es hasheni b'rishon. Iser, umahu isura shal isuzeh. So what is the maskana? Does it work or doesn't it work? Are you chayiv or not? And therefore, so too, this Isser Olai Kikar will have the same impact. So Isser is a lotion at Tfosos Shavuos. It works like hatfasa. But if you learn shamatris b'shvua einay kenishba l'inyan carbon malchus, then afa iser ein boy loy carbon v'loy malchus. Okay. Now this is how Tosfos. This is how Rashi learns the Gemara. We learned it in Rashi. Tosfos asks on Rashi, I don't like your pshat, because where do you ever find that the Brisa Atana doesn't give you a conclusive answer? Israel is like Hatfasa Shvua. And if you hold Chayiv, you hold Potter. Well, what is the law? What do you hold? So that's one of the reasons why Tosfos doesn't like this pshat. So he says other reasons why he doesn't like this pshat. So he actually learns a little bit differently, but let's stick to Rashi's pshat for now. Zog to Gemara weiter. Umimai de mevate shvua. Mevate was the first lashon mentioned in the brisa, that it's just like a shvua. So if someone said mevate kikar zualai, it's as if he swore that he wouldn't eat it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Where do we see of a occur in the Torah that the expression of mevate constitutes a shvua? It says in the pasuk, "Oy nefesh kisi shava ulivate bisvasayim." So you see, the word bitui is used in conjunction with a shvua. If that's the case, well then Isser Nami. Isser also, you find the Torah uses it in conjunction with a shvua. Dichsiv kol neder v'chol shvuos Isser. So you see clearly the lashon Isser is also used in conjunction with a shvua. So why is there a distinction in the brisa between what a mevate is, which is an outright shvua, versus an Isser, which is only a hatfasas of a shvua? Ella mimai de Isser mitvis b'shvu. So how do I know that Isser is mitvis b'shvu if it has the same lashon? Dichsiv oy asra Isar al nafsha b'shvu. So what do you see from there? Rashi says it's mashma shasrasai v'tafsasai b'davar shenishbal of kfar. So oy asra Isar al nafsha, how b'shvu, by being matvis something else that had already been usher, by being matvis that with the Isser. So again, usher Isser al nafsha. How did you make something usher to you? B'shvua, by being matvis another item that a shvu was placed upon it prior. Frank the Gemara, if that's the case, mevate nami haksiv. By mevate, we also have such a nusach. It says k'chol asher yivate ha'adam b'shvua, which you can interpret the same way, that it's referring to the hatfasa of a shvu. So once again, where do you see in psukim a distinction between the lashon mevate, which is a shvua itself, versus a lashon Isser, which is only the status of hatfasa shvua? El Omer Abaye, mevate shvu mehacha. It says im haya yisiya leish unidareha aleha ay miftas vaseh asher asher al nafsha. If you notice, there's not one mention of the word shvua in this pasuk. It just says miftas sefaseh. Vilu shvua like Amar. There is no mention of any shvua in this pasuk. So b'may asra nafsha. What type of Isser? How did this woman create an Isser for herself? It wasn't a shvua because it doesn't mention the word shvua in this pasuk. It's b'mavate. It's b'mavate. So you see the word mavate alone, without anything else, constitutes an Isser in the shvua. So that's how you know that mevate is a shvua in and of itself. You don't have such a pasuk. You don't have such a pasuk when it refers to the word Isser. And Tosfos does mention that there are similar psukim with the word Isser, but Tosfos deflects that there wouldn't be a raya from those psukim. So that is Abaye's pshat. Abaye's pshat in the brisa is that mivta is as if you made a shvua. Isser is as if you were matvis on something that a shvua was made upon prior. Rava has a different approach to pshat in this brisa. La'olam ei malach mitvis b'shvua lav kamoishu shvua mipivdami. Let's say Allah l'maisa being matvis in a shvua. If you say I want kikar 2 to be just like Kikar 1, it wouldn't be a good Shvua. V'hachika Amar. This is what the Brisa means to say. Mevate is a Shvua. Iser Nami Shvua. And Iser is also a proper Shvua. As Rashi says, V'hachika Amar Mevate Shvua, Iser Nami Lashon Shvuahu. It's not a Lashon of Hatfasa. It's a real Lashon of Shvua, just like Mevate. Asroi de Iser. What is the Iser created by this nusach of Iser? Hitilu akosov bein neder l'shvua. It's actually quite adaptable. In other words, when you use kikar zeh asar alai, it could actually mean one of two things. It's adaptable to be a shvua, or it's also adaptable to be a neder. Neder. If you expressed it, you articulated using the format of neder, then in fact it will be a neder, and Baloshan Shvua is Shvua. So we see now here in the Gemara a distinction between neder and Shvua. So let's first see Rashi, and then we'll talk a little bit about that distinction. Iser zehitilu akosef, hainu pirish the iser. This is the pirish of the words in the Brisa, iser, and that is imata omer. Depends on how you say it. V'hachikomer, iser shel iser, shamaiti loch, shu Shvua, loy kol halashoy no shavois. Not every way that you would articulate the word iser would lead to a Shvua. Sometimes it would lead to a neder. Sharehi tilo yakosov be neder l'shvua. The pasuk puts it in a place in between. It's in between the word neder and the word shvua, meaning it's adaptable to either one. Imami rosay b'lashon shvua. If you expressed it b'lashon shvua, kigoyin iser shaloi oichel kikar zeh. So let's just give a little laktama. The difference between a shvua and a neder is a shvua. The basic difference is many differences, but the basic difference is a shvua is about you. You're not doing anything to the kikar. You're prohibiting yourself from eating the kikar. But a neder is not about you. You're placing an iser on the neder, on the kikar. This kikar becomes also. So the distinction is the shvua is on the gavra and the neder is on the chefza. So if you express the lashon iser sounding like a shvua, sounding like you were trying to put an iser on a person, going iser shaloi oichel kikar zeh. I will not eat this kikar. There's nothing happening to the kikar, but there's a commitment for me not to eat it. Kain lashon on the shpoim marim. That is how you articulate a shvua. Shaloi oichel. Afa iser shatzib lashon zeh will be a shvua, and therefore it's subject to the carbon oil yored if it's violated the chayiv carbon. The imlav, but if you articulated it b'lashon neder and not b'lashon shvua, elayti b'lashon neder. So Omar iser kikar zu alai, this kikar shall be usher upon me. So now I'm not placing an iser on myself. Rather, I'm placing an iser on the kikar. Shehu lashon anoidrim. That's the way you articulate a neder. Koinim ze alai. This should be usher upon me. Av ze neder. This would be a neder as well. Upata miklar. So basically, what the Brisa is saying, according to Rava, is iser is an adaptable word. It can either be adapted to articulate a shvua, or it can be adapted to articulate a neder. If it articulates a shvua, it will be chayiv a carbon oil yored, and if not, it will not. It will not. Okay, let's see the Brisa inside to see how it reads according to Rava. Tana Rabbanan, Mevata is a shvua, and iser is a shvua, but it's adaptable. Iser. What is the iser of using the word iser? Imata omer iser shvua. If you articulate the iser with a lashon shvua, iser alai lechol hazeh. So then you'll be chayiv and it'll be yored because it'll take on the iser of a shvua. But vimlav, if you articulate it as a neder, not as a shvua, potter, you'll be potter from a carbon oil yored, because you don't bring a carbon oil yored for violating a neder, you only bring it for violating a shvua. So those are our two pshatim. Is iser an adaptable word, but it's shvua mamish, which is how Rava learns, or is iser hatfasa shvua, like Abaye said, and then it's subject to what the halacha would be when you're matvis a shvua. Zog to Gemara weiter. Heichon hitilu. Where do you see that it's an adaptable word? The word iser, according to Rava. Then beis isha nadara. Asher iser al nafshe b'shvua. So you see the word iser is placed smack in between isha nadara and al nafshe b'shvua. So you see iser is adaptable to both. But ozdul l'temayu. And Abaya and Rava, who argue about whether or not iser means a hatfasa shvua, according to Abaye, there's only validity to a tfasa shvua if being matvis b'shvua is a good shvua. If not, then it's nothing at all. V'adil kamayu d'itmar mitvis b'shvua Abaye Omar kamoiche shvua mipivdami. It is a good shvua, and therefore using the word iser, which Abaye says that the Brisa is saying has a status of a tfasa shvua, would be a good shvua. V'rava malav kamoiche shvua mipivdami. It's not like you're being matvis shvua. So what good is it to say that an issue is like being matvis a shvua if being matvis a shvua doesn't do anything? So therefore, Rava learned that Isser means a shvua mamish, but it depends on how it's articulated. And again, this is another point that Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's pshat, because now the Gemara is assuming that Abaye is explaining in the Brisa that it is kamachi shvua pivdami, but that's not how Abaye read the Brisa. Abaye read the Brisa that it's a hatfasa shvua, and it depends on what you hold by hatfasa shvua. It's much that the Brisa remains inconclusive as to whether or not this is a good shvua. And now, the way the Gemara is understanding it is Abaye is learning that it's vaday a good shvua. So that's why Tosfos did not like Rashi's pshat. Zog to Gemara weiter. Meisvei. Ezeu iser ha'amar b'Torah. What is the iser referred to in the Torah? Zog to heilige Brisa. Ha'omer harei alai shaloi oichel basar shaloi eshte yain. If someone says harei alai, I will not eat basar, I will not drink wine, kiyoim shemeis boy ovid, kiyoim shemeis boy ploni, kiyoim shenerg boy Gedalia ben Echikam, Kiyoim Shara Yushalai Berchabana Aser. So, and Shmuel comments, so this clearly seems to indicate that an Isser is a hatfasa, which supports Abaye, which does not support Rava, holds Isser could either be an outright neder or it could be an outright shvua, but it's not a tfasa. But clearly, from this brisa, you see that it's shaloi basar kiyoim shemeis be'ovav. So it is making an atfas. It's comparing it to a day that had already been neser prior due to a previous shvua or nether. So that is a Gemara's kasha. But let's just go through the details of the brisa. What does Rashi say? Kiyom shemeis be'ovav. Kasher asarti alai basar b'yoim shebeis by abba lo'olam. I had already, prior to this day, made a shvua or a neder that I would never eat on the day of my father's yahrzeit forever. And now he's making another neder. Today I'm not going to eat basar and yayin, just like I had already asked basar and yayin to myself on the day of my father's yahrzeit. Or or if he did the same thing when his Rebbe died. There are those who change his Pliny to Rebbe, because a person would also be makabel, like certain restrictions on his Rebbe's yahrzeit, just like he would on his father's yahrzeit. Or or if someone was makabel upon himself Isurim on time Gedalia. Or I assume means Tisha B'Av. Also, his atfasa works, but the Amashmul Vushanadar Ubama Oisayim. That's only if he had already made a neder on that day. Zok Rashi, Shakibel Alav Kfar Neder Shalo Yoichel Basar B'Yoim Shemeis B'Aviv Loilam. He must have had already accepted upon himself an Isser Loilam to eat Basar V'Yayin on the day that his father died. V'chein Yoim Shemeis B'Ploini, V'chein Yoim Shenerg B'Agidalia. The kasalka daita hashta. Right now, when the Gemara is asking a kasha from this brisa on Rava, the hainu matvis beneder. This seems to be a case of matvis beneder, which is exactly what Abaya learns, what Isser means, but not Rava. The katani ezo Isser ha'amr b'Torah shehu b'bal yachel devarai ha'omer harei alai. Alma, you clearly see hamatvis beneder hareyu b'lo yachel keneder atzmai. Umidamatvis beneder neder matvis b'shvua shvua. You see how tfasa works. Once you see how tfasa works, it shouldn't make a difference if it's by a neder, as Shmuel defines this case as, or if it was by a shvua. How tfasa works, this seems to support Abaye Shita. Zogt Gemara b'shlam al Abaye, the matvis b'neder neder, matvis b'shvua shvua, and therefore you have a good raya to Abaye Shita. Ella l'Rava, according to Rava, who holds that if you're matvis in a shvua, it doesn't work. How does it work over here? Zakta Gemara, Amalach Rava, Tritz Mahachi. It's not atfasa at all. It's absolutely not atfasa, the case that we just learned. It sounds at first glance like atfasa, but it's not. And this is how you understand that price. Ezo Isur Neder, Ha'amr B'Tayr. What is the Isur Neder that the Torah states? Ha'omer Harei Alai. If you spoke out, the Farish, I will not eat basar, and I won't eat yayin. Kiyom shemeis by Aviv, or kiyom shenerg by Rebbe, the Amar Shmuel v'ushanadar ba ma'asayin. That's a regular neder. That's not atfasa. But what is atfasa? So Rashi tells us atfasa is if I just say today should be like that day, without explaining what that means. If you say today should be also to eat basar and yayin like that other day, that's not atfasa because you spoke out the first today. I shouldn't be able to eat basar and yayin. Atfasa is only if I said I just want today to be like that day without explaining what that means. That's atfasa. That in fact doesn't work. But this brisa is not talking about atfasa at all. It's just talking about one of the ways to make a neder. You couldn't make a neder by saying the isur, by articulating the isur, and also comparing it to another day. That doesn't take away from the nether, it still would be a good nether. My time, where do you see that this is a vowel nether? Omakra ish ki yidar nether lashem, acha yidar bedavar another. You could make a nether and compare it to something that already had an isser on it. Period. Let's see Rashi. Trishveima, kloimer hai tana, lam b'matvis b'neder iri. This time they're not talking about being matvis in a nether, like Abaya learns. Rather, ela be'ikr nether iri. The Tana is talking about the flagship case of Nedarim, how you make a nether. What is the structure of a nether? Vashmina, and the Tana teaches us. She'ina chayv b'neder, elam kein pirsheyu. You have to articulate the isser. That means today I should be usher and basar and yayin, and the achakach toloi b'davar anider alav kvar, and only then could you be toilet in something that you made a nether on it first. Could yalaf love also mikra. V'achik Ezo isu neder, avol mitvis beneder lav nederhu. This price is not saying that being matvis for a neder is a good neder. It's not. Rava disputes that. So mitvis. What is the case of mitvis, which Rava says does not work? The going shaloi pirish harei alai shaloi oichel basar v'shaloi eshte yayin. He didn't articulate the isur itself. Elo amar harei alai yom zeh yom zeh. He's just saying today should be like yom shemes be'aviv. But he's not saying exactly what he wants to draw from that day. That hatfasa, that according to Rava doesn't work. But a flagship case of nether is when you usher something upon yourself with a nether, you are comparing it to something that already being usher with a nether. The only problem that I have with this Gemara is, so how did someone make the first nether in the first place? How did the first nether come? If you always had to be matvis on something else that was necessary with a nether, how did someone make the first nether? I was struggling with that and I don't have the answer. So if anybody has any suggestions, please share. Okay, so now the Gemara gets into the details of the brisa that we quoted a little bit off in a tangent. Pshita, kiyoim shenerag boy gedalia b'nechikam, it's true. So effectively, kiyoim shemesh be'avav is pshita. Why do I need the brisa to speak out kiyom shemesh be'av? Shita Kivan the taima mishum the nother ubahu alav misas aviv malikan. What is the whole point that Rav is trying to drive home? He's trying to drive home that you compared it to something, to a day that had already been usher to you mikayach neder. So what's him in a gay that it's his father's yahrzeit? Any day that he would have accepted upon himself this iser basar v'yayin would be a day to compare it to. Why is it relevant that it's punct his father's yahrzeit? V'chi mishum demeis by aviv migra gara isurei. Is his nether on the day of his father's yahrzeit any different because it's his father's yahrzeit? Hare another ubalav. So, why was it necessary for the Tana to list off Kiyom Shemesh B'Alva? There's no Chiddush there. But the Tana is listing off a whole bunch of individual cases, and in one of those cases, it's a Chiddush. Kiyom Shenerag Boy Gedalia Ben Achikam Istrichle. That's the Chiddush. The Chiddush is that even if you said Kiyom Shenerag Boy Gedalia Ben Achikam, that even that would be a good atfasa. Why? So I would have thought, even the chiloi nadar. Let's say I never made a neder to answer myself from Bosav Yayin on the yahrzeit of Gedalia ben Achika. On Tzom Gedalia, it would have been nasser anyway because there's an iser to eat. There's a chiv to fast on Tzom Gedalia. So the kiv and the chiloi nadar nami aser, since it would have been aser there. The iser on Tzom Gedalia, besides your neder, is also the iser that Chazal made to fast, to eat, the mechayva fast. So kinadar nami, when I make a neder and I'm trying to compare it to Gedalia ben Achikam, I'm not comparing it to the neder portion. Maybe I'm comparing it to the portion that Chazal answered. So kinadar nami lehavi ala iser, there wouldn't be an iser, and therefore b'hai lav mitvas benederhu kamash alone that it works. Let's see Rashi. Ma'u detema kivan the chiloi nadar aser. Even if you didn't ask yourself to eat on Tzom Gedalia, it would be also anyway to eat on Tzom Gedalia. So ki nader nami la mitvus benederhu kamash v'lam. So
who says when he says that Yom means that he made a neder for it? Why can it's
okay? So hold that for a second. Hold that for a second. I hear what you're saying, but hold it for a second. Zok to Gemara. I just want to focus something on Rashi because Rashi just says v'loy garsinan. Rashi says, don't be goyrus that since it's the Rabbanon, your neder that you made on it, on Tzom Gedalia, would be chal. You know why? Even if the chiv to fast on Tzom Gedalia would be a chiv dairaisa, we would still say amrinon hanedorim chalim al dvar mitzvah kedvar harishos. Even if there was an issur to eat on Tzom Gedalia b'daraisa, a neder would still chal upon it anyway. So therefore, Zok Rashi, there's definitely a neder on it. But you would have thought that if you're being matfis on the Tzom Gedalia day, you're not being matfis on the neder issur. You're being matfis on the original issur that Chazal placed on it, or that the Torah placed on it. Kamash malon, that it is a good atfasa. So that's how I know that we're not referring to being matvis the iser of Tzom Gedalia. It's clear from Rashi that we're being matvis the iser that you added on to the Tzom Gedalia. Zok the Heilige Gemara weiter. The Af Rabbi Yochanan Savar Law Lahada Rav. Rabbi Yochanan also agrees to Rava. And what point is he agreeing on? The iser shaitziyah b'lashon Shvua is going to be a Shvua. In other words, what did Rava say? Iser is an adaptable word. It could be used to describe a neder. It could be used to describe a shvua, depending on how it was articulated. That would determine what it was. So Rabbi Yochanan also agrees to that. Why? Also Rabin Rabbi Yochanan. When Rabin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, he said as follows: Mivate loy oichalach. If someone said the words Mivate loy oichalach or Iser loy oichalach, Shvua, it's a Shvua. So you see clearly that when you use the word Iser and you use it while articulating a lashon that sounds like a Shvua, Lo Yochel, I will not eat it, it has the din of a Shvua. So you see that the word Iser, if it's used as a Shvua, will be a Shvua. Ki Yasher Avdimi Amar B'Yochanan. Oichel v'loy oichel is sheker. If someone swears in the future, I will eat this piece of cake today, or I will not eat this piece of cake today, and then he either eats it when he said he wouldn't, or he doesn't eat it when he said he would, that would be defined as a Shvua sheker, and therefore on a Shvua sheker, you bring a carbon oil of yoyer, and where is the lab to make a Shvua sheker? On the other hand, if you made a Shavua on a Lisha Avar, a Chalti v'shaloy Chalti, which the moment you make that Shavua, it's a wasted Shavua because it's wrong the moment it's made, that we don't call a Shavua Sheker, that we call a Shavua Shav. And you know where the lav is for making a Shavua Shav, it says Laisisa Hashem Alekecha Lashav. That is the pasuk in the Aseret Sedibros. Okay, Gvaldik. Koinamais is a lashon nether. Koinim kikar zalai. Over below yachel devar. So just to get it clear, a shvua on lehaba is a shvua sheker. A shvua on lisha avar is a shvua shav, and a nether koinim you're over with the lav of leyachel devar. So again, I missed out the lav. The lav of al-haba is l'shishavu b'shmi l'sheker. The lav for swearing on l'sha avar is l'sisa Hashem alekecha lashav, and the lav for nedarim is l'yachel devarim. Let's see Rashi. Oichel v'loychel kloimer shvu laba kari shvu sheker. V'asarasei, where's the lav for shvu sheker? V'loisishmu b'shmi l'sheker v'achi kamar loisishmu b'shmi kidei l'shaker b'shvu aschem lachazman. So Loishashbu B'Shmila Sheker means don't swear so that you could violate the Shavua later on and make the Shavua later on into a Shavua Sheker. The Master Boy. So Rashi says, what's the nafkamina? What the lav is? You're not allowed to do either of them. Zokt Rashi makes a very big difference because in order for you to give somebody malchus, you have to give him a proper warning, and you have to warn him about which specific lav he's violating. The master boy tzarich lahasris boy shahu oiver ba'asaris l'shishavu b'shmila shaker. So if someone made a shvu not to eat his kikar and he's about to eat his kikar, the Edom have to warn him, you're not allowed to eat this kikar because if you do, you're being over the lav of l'shavu l'shishavu b'shmila shaker. What if it was a shvu on a l'sha'avar, like a chalti v'loy a chalti? Kol shvu l'sha'avar she'ena emes. Any shvu you make on l'sha'avar that's a false shvu. Kuya Shvua Shav. That we're calling a Shvua Shav. The Lashon Shav means Lashon V'loi Klum. It's a waste. It's a nothing. K'moy b'chav l'shav l'shavi kesis b'nechem afkan yotzases amipiv levatala. The Shvua came out of his mouth for nothing because it was wrong the moment it was uttered. Where is the law for that? Vazarase, one moment. Vazarase miloi sisa, and that we know from the pasuk of Loisisa. And if you're warning somebody who is making or about to make a Shavuot Shav, I don't know how they would know that he's about to make a Shavuot Shav, but he would have to warn him that he's going to be over on L'Sisa Shem Shav and Kainamois, which are Nedarim, Harezah Lo Yachel, Claimer Lo Yachel, the Mashma Laba. It's Mashma. Don't make chulin, don't make cheap the words that you said earlier. Lab Las Haras Shavuos Laba. It's a lab that's referring to a Shvua and Laba. The Shvuas Laba, Miloi, Sishavu, B'Shmila Sharka, nothing. Now, the reason why we don't apply this to a Shvua of Laba is because we already have a law for a Shvua Laba. Now, this is also on Laba, Lo Yachel, so we'll apply it to Nedarim. V'chiyas Lo Yachel, Las Haras Nedarim also, it came for Nedarim. La Fukim Id Ravin, that will tell us that we don't look like Ravin, the Amar Asar Shavuos Laba, also Lo Yachel. So Ravin, we're going to see later on, holds that Lo Yachel is actually referring to a Shvua Laba. But Rabbi Yochanan here is saying, no, another, which is Laba, is Lo Yachel, a Shvua of Laba is Lo Shishavu B'Shmila Shoker, and a Shvua on Lisha Avar, which is a lie, is called a Shvua Shav, and that's Lo Sisa Shem Hashem Alekecha Lashav. Okay. Yirma, you had a question?
Yeah. How, if somebody says, I won't eat cake,
what if questions that we can't look at what if questions now. We have to focus because it's a little bit complicated. So you're asking a what if. What ifs I don't do. I don't do what ifs. I'll discuss that. I'll get to as soon as we're finished. I'll discuss that. But now I got to keep on moving because we're learning how to darshan the psukim. So zog to Gemara weiter. So that is the first pshat. Shav v'sheker echad. Shav and sheker are the same. We just said that the Shvua Shav and Shvua Sheker are two different things. Shav is sha'avar, and you learn it from L'shisa Hashem Hashem Elokecha L'Shav, and Sheker is lahaba, and it's L'shav b'shmil Sheker. But the Brisa says they're exactly the same. So my love, what does the Brisa mean when the Brisa says they're exactly the same? That's me the Shav l'sha'avar, just like a Shvua Shav is swearing on something that happened in the past. Av Sheker nami l'sha'avar. A Shvua Sheker must also be referring to l'sha'avar. And if that's the case, that's shver on how we're learning. Almo achalti v'lo achalti shekerhu. You see that achalti v'lo achalti is also lo shishava b'shmila sheker, because we're placing Shavua Shav and Shavua Sheker into the same category. So if that's the case, so what is a Shavua Shav? What is the difference? So let's see what Rashi says. Ma Shav l'shavar kagoy nishbal davar she'i efsher shakol yoidim she'ein Shavua klum. Someone swore that yesterday was the sky was green. It's obvious something that's wrong. Av Sheker l'shavar kagoy nachalti v'lo yachalti. Vahi lo mikri shav. A Shvua l'shavar v'achalti v'lo yachalti won't be called a Shvua Shav. It will be called a Shvua Sheker. Why? So Rashi is saying there still has to be a distinction between Shvua Shav and Shvua Sheker. They might both be referring to the Shavar, but there's got to be a distinction. The distinction is very simple. A Shav is a wasted Shvua. You swear on something that's nonsense. Yesterday the sky was green. But if you swear about something that could be true, I didn't eat cake yesterday, that wouldn't be a Shvua Shav, that would be a Shvua Sheker. That would be the distinction according to this point in the Gemara. Let me just finish the Rashi. Now that we used up and both for Shavuos of Li Sha'avar, so now Lo Yachal Devarei is not available to be talked about a nether. Lo Yachal Devarei must be referring to a Shavu on Laba. Aval Lo Shishavu B'Shmila Sheker is on a Shavu Sha'avar. V'Hachi Kamar. The Torah is telling you, don't make a false shvua. Unlike what we learned earlier, that Lo Shishava B'Shmil Sheker was going on a shvua on Laba, and the way Rashi touched it was, don't be mishaker your shvua. We're touching it now is don't swear shvua sheker right away. So Zok Gemara, no, you don't have a raya from that brayta that compares the two, that they're both going on the shavar. Midi area, who says? The Brisa doesn't mean to say that they're both referring to the Shavar. No, the Shvua Sheker is on Haba and the Shvua Shav on the Shavar. Umay Dover Acher Hein. So Dover Echad Hein. So what did the Tana mean when he said that Shvua Shav and Shvua Sheker are the same? All it means is the B'dibur Echad Nemru. When the Torah told us that you're not allowed to swear the Sheker, B'dibur Echad, the Rebbeinu Shalom told us you're not allowed to swear l'shav. Why would the Torah do that? We'll see in a minute. But when the Kadosh Baruch Hu told us, he said sheker and shav at the same time. Kidatanya, where do we find this familiar concept? By Zachar v'Shamar. Zachar v'Shamar b'dibur echad nemru. Right in the Seres HaDibros, in one of them it says Zachar, and in the Schanin it says Shamar. Which one were said by the Harsinai? They were both said b'vasachas. Masha'ein hapeh yochel adaber. A human mouth cannot articulate two words simultaneously. Umasha'ein oizen yochel shmoya. And the human ear can't decipher two words spoken together and separate them into the two components. It just sounds like a mumble jumble.
So 1 minute. In Yisro, will it say one and in Eschana the other?
When it comes to Shav and Sheker?
Shomer v'Zocher, that's the case, right?
Yeah. But Shomer Zachar, it says Shomer in one place, Zachar in another.
That's right. Is that the same case by Shav and Sheker?
I don't think so. I think it says the same.
So how can you do that? How can they do that? We have a
I'm not sure.
raya for the first one, but none for the
You
second.
see it. You actually see the words. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It's a good point. I don't know the answer. So let's see what the Gemara says. Bishlema Hasam v'dibar echad nemer. Bishlema by Shomer v'Zachar. I understand. It was v'dibar echad nemer. Kidei Rav Ada bar Ava. The Amar of Ada bar Ava. Noshim chayavos b'kiddush hayoyim dvar Torah. Women are chayiv in kiddush midaraisa. The Amar Kra, because it says in the pasuk Zachar v'Shamar, and we learn Kesh kol sheyesh noi b'shmira yesh noi b'schira. Anyone who's included in the Isser of Shomer Hashem HaShabbos, they're not allowed to do malacha, they also are b'chuv in the schira of Kiddush. But these women, hoil v'isnu b'shmira, isnu nami b'schira. Elahacha l'mahilchas m'boile. Even if you're going to say that the Shvua Shav and the Shvua Sheker was nemar b'dibur echad, what do we derive from that? What's the significance? What do we need to learn from that? Ella, so I'll tell you what it means. It's not b'dibur echad. It just means Ella kashem shaloika al shav kach loika nami al sheker. The Tana is just telling us the same way you get malchus for a shvua shav, so too you get malchus for a shvua sheker. Now the funny thing about it is it makes more sense to say you get malchus for shvua sheker, because shvua sheker we're saying is labo. I won't eat and I ate, so I did a ma'aseh. When you do a ma'aseh that's prohibited, I understand why you get malchus. But a shvua shav, there's only a dibur. You're swearing that yesterday the sky was green. So how would you tell me that? How do I know you get malchus for an avera that has a ma'aseh because you get malchus for a shvua shav that has no ma'aseh? This Svar is exactly the opposite. Klapelaya. Ella ema kashem shaloika al sheker kach loika nami al shav. The same way we know there'll be a chiv malchus for shvua sheker because that is allowed sheyesh by ma'aseh. So too you get malchus for a shvua shav. Frek Gemara pshita high lav. They're both lavin. Why do I need to learn one from the other? They're both lavin. You might have thought that you learn like Rav Papa told Abaye, which is lo yinaka klal. It says lo yinaka Hashem esher asher yisha shemoy lashav, that there is no kapora for it, and therefore you don't get malchus for it because there's no way out of such a horrible avera of a shvua shav, because that is the nusach that's said by shvua shav lo yinaka. Depending on Tamar Aleph, Kamash Malon Kedeshani, the way he answered, which we're going to learn the Gemara later. Kamash Malon Abaye answered him, and what he told him was that Hashem lo yinaka, but al yidei bezdin there's a nikoi with malchus. V'bay sema, or another svar you could say in the similarity between shav and sheker is kashem shemaybe carbon al sheker, the same way you bring a carbon oil of yored for shvua sheker kach maybe carbon al shvua shav. You bring a carbon on shvua shav. Now shvua shav is a shvua on l'sha'avar, and we already learned at the beginning of the Masechta that there's a machlokes tanoim if you bring a carbon oil of a yored on a shvua on l'sha'avar, but Rabbi Kiva, this brayso could be going according to Rabbi Kiva to mechayev l'sha'avar kelahaba. Okay, Gavalti. Let's take a look at Rashi, and we do have still an issue with what David asked. Is Lemais, it doesn't say Shav and Sheker, you don't find that it said. So I'm not.
There's a lot of things that it says that you did the echad them. You could do them tasks off and not see this flag. A Phyllis is mish what I said is different. That this fact that it doesn't say there might be.
Okay, so that's a good teretz. So what Chaim is saying is you find other places where there's two different psukim, not necessarily even by the sense where the Gemara tells us about it, that it's b'dibur echad them. Okay, Gavaltik. There's a big shaila if women are chayiv in kiddush in havdalah midaraisa or not, and that's why most people are noig that if there's a man around, the man will be moitzi the woman with havdalah, but avada a woman could be moitzi herself with havdalah. Another important question. Another important question is the Gemara says we want to learn zechira from shmira. Just like a woman has a chiyuv to be shomer Shabbos, she's governed by the Isurim of Shabbos, so too she's governed by the Asayas of Shabbos that she normally wouldn't be governed by because it's a mitzvah Seishes Man Grama. Who said you look at it that way? Maybe look at it exactly the opposite. Maybe you say since she can't make Kiddush, she doesn't have to keep Shabbos. And you know where you see something like that? You see something like that by Payas, right? We say since she doesn't have a beard, she doesn't have the mitzvah, she doesn't have this her Payas. Who said you should go L'Kula? Maybe you should go L'Chumra. As Tosh was asked, Ibcha Lekala Meimar. Don't say make the Hekesh the other way, because by default, if you have a Hekesh to be made and you could learn it L'Kula or L'Chumra, the L'Chumra Makshinon. The default is always L'Chumra. Correct, Taisvis. What about what we learned in Kedushin? It says like Sakivu pas roishchem. You're not allowed to cut your payas off. And in the same pasuk it says v'lo sashchis es pasuk you're not allowed to be mashchis your beard. And we learned kol sheyeshnei bashchosa yeshnei ba'kafa. V'haninashi, but women hoyev lestu bashchosa, since they don't have beards, so they can't be included in the v'lo sashchis es pasuk. So therefore they don't have a chiyuv. They don't have an Isser to cut their payas. Here's Chumrah, right? If you follow the approach of our Gemara, we should say Fakir. The Baal, she has payas, and she's not allowed to cut her payas off, she wouldn't be able to cut her beard. Zok Rashi, there is no way to say the Baal it's also for her to cut her payas, it's also for her to cut her beard. The Noshi last luzake. Women don't have beards, so therefore it would be impossible to go that way. No comment. Zok Tigomar weiter. V'chein ha de Omar be'erchin gab the Tanya kol chayovim betzitzis chayhanim leviim v'Yisraelim umasik v'hane kahani hoyel v'ishru klaim gabayu. The Gemara says Kohanim in their big kahuna there's a heter for them to wear klaim loy lechayvu. Maybe they shouldn't be chayv on tzitzis. That was the Gemara's kasha. But maybe you say fakir. You don't say lechumra. You don't say lechul. You say lechumra. You wouldn't be able to say that vibalt they're not mechuyev in klayim. You wouldn't be able to say vibalt mechuyev in tzitzis they're usher in klayim because they have to wear the big kahuna. So Tosfos goes through different cases where you would have to learn differently, but normally the default is if you have a hekesh to be made that can be l'chumra or l'kula, you always make the hekesh l'chumra. Okay, we'll stop here. Your Birmani, what did you want to ask them?